Hi, I'm Kathleen Kovalt, and I'm very happy to be presenting for the SSE's 2024 conference, A Great Shift, Consciousness, Healing, and Reality. And I'm going to be exploring how our state of consciousness influences our perception of reality. This presentation will explore how our perception of the nature of reality changes depending on our state of consciousness. And therefore, our thinking and decision-making processes are influenced by our current emotional, energetic state. This presentation is also about getting to know yourself better, becoming aware of the various ways you tend to emotionally and energetically react to the people and events around you and even within you. How do you habitually respond when someone pushes your buttons? When you become upset, do you get into the same destructive patterns with your partner, family, friends, or coworkers, and it seems as if nothing ever gets resolved? The good news is that once you have identified the ways you tend to react to situations and realize that when you are in an off-centered state of consciousness, your perception of what is going on is filtered by that state, and you can consciously choose to return to your calm, clear, centered state where you will be able to see more clearly, communicate more effectively, and make better decisions. So let's begin by looking at an overview. There's an event. The event could be anything. It could be outside of you, like somebody says something that you're really off put by. Oh my gosh, how could they say that? It could be a situation where you're working on a project and you just can't figure it out. Something's happening and you get so frustrated. Or it could be as easy as you're working on something and you haven't eaten for a while, and someone comes into the room to say something to you, and your whole internal state, you're so hungry and you're kind of grumpy, and you say something you wish you didn't to that person because it's really what's going on inside of you. So you have a reaction to an event. That's being human. That's what we do. There's an event and we react to it. And often we react in a lot of the same ways over and over again. We have sort of habits in how we tend to react. Now, what we want to do is become aware of those tendencies. How do we usually react? And as you become aware of that, you can become aware when you're in it. Oh, I've done it again. Oh, I'm acting like that again. I feel like that again. So you become aware of your psychological, emotional, energetic state, and then you can choose to pull yourself out of that state back to your center as quickly as possible. And we'll talk about this. This is kind of hard to do right at the beginning. It's not that easy because when you're in these different states, it's as if that's the real reality. But one of the things I'm going to share today is it's not the real reality. What is reality? It's kind of hard. And as I'm going to propose, it changes depending on your state of consciousness. So if you can become aware that you're off center and you can pull yourself back to your center, it's there that you can consciously choose how you will handle the situation. Because when you're off center, you will act in ways that you habitually react, filtered by how you are perceiving reality at that time, which may not be very accurate. So let's just begin with, how do you know what your calm, clear center is? How do you know when you're in it? How does it feel when you're in that place? So you can know what you want to come back to. Well, I like to think of your center as a state of consciousness that's characterized by serenity, gratitude, a sense of calm, power, a clear understanding, and even radiant love. And how can you get there? Well, there's a lot of different ways, different for everybody. A lot of folks like to meditate, but that's not the only way. For instance, if you like yoga, do you guys know what a mountain pose is? You stand, feet very together, your spine upright, your hands are hanging down, but your palms are facing forward. And you really ground yourself into the earth, and your spine is up, and yet your energy's lifting upwards, and you're connected both to the earth and to what's above. And it's a wonderful place to be to get centered. But you don't have to do that. You can take a walk out in nature, taking a walk, looking at the beautiful sky, the leaves are changing. Oh, look, there's a little squirrel over there. And that's a wonderful way for many people to get back to their center. Do you love music? Put on one of your favorite pieces. It's a little bit better if it was calmer, maybe a little classical or Baroque, that might be a little bit better. And immerse yourself in the music. That's a nice way to get to your center. So there's many different ways, but the main thing is, how do you get there and how do you know when you are there? That's an important piece of this you have to explore. And I believe that when you come to your center, you can also think of it as you go into your heart. Many people use those kinds of words. So you go into your heart. And when you're there, I believe you are most directly aligned to a higher perspective and wisdom that I call your soul. I believe that when you're in that centered state, you can make better life decisions because, in fact, connected to your soul or who you really are as an individualized portion of the all, you can access your higher guidance. You can access a higher perspective that the soul has because the soul is beyond this personality in this lifetime that we are right now. So, an event happens, it pushes your buttons, and you tend to react in a habitual way, and you energetically shift away from your center to an agitated, emotional, energetic state. Now, when you're in that particular emotional vibration, it is as if you have moved your awareness to a distinct field of energy where everything else, all your memories and thoughts that also share that particular vibration, are readily accessible to you. So much so that your awareness, your thinking process, your decision making process are clouded by what you are experiencing internally while you're in that psychological, emotional, energetic state. So the types of thoughts you were thinking become dependent on the type of psychological, emotional, energetic states that you're in. We can say that each emotion has a distinct vibration. For example, fear is a vibration, and everything fearful lives at that vibe. So when you're in fear, it's like you're in a vibe, like a field of fear. And all the emotions and all the memories of the times when you were in that same state of fear and everything connected with it kind of lives at that place. Okay. So they're so real and present for you. Do you ever get fearful and then remember all the other times that same kind of fear came up for you? Or do you ever get really angry and you remember every jerk that ever did the same sort of thing for you? It's because they're all right there. Some people might call that like state dependent memory. Okay. So that's how you see the world at that moment in time is you're either fearful and everything you have to be afraid of, or you're angry and everybody's a jerk. So it's clouding how you're perceiving reality. That state of consciousness that you're in is filtering your perception of reality in that moment. And therefore, it's difficult to make a good decision because you don't see all the options. You only see the options that exist in that particular world. There's a great quote by the playwright Sophocles, and he said, "To the person who is afraid, everything rustles." And again, that means that when you're in that fearful state, you start hearing all the noises that were present before, but now they're heightened. And what's that? And oh my gosh, what else is going on? You become very heightened and aware of things that could make you even more afraid. So, from your off centered vibration, you're interpreting what other people say also from that perspective. You're not just seeing the world through the eyes of fear or through the angry eyes. You are interpreting what other people are trying to communicate to you from that perspective. So it is possible and probably likely to misinterpret and misunderstand the meaning of what the other person is saying. The person's words are twisted to fit into your state of mind and what you expect within that worldview. Similarly, when another person is off center, they will misinterpret and misunderstand the true meaning of what you're trying to say. And while they are off center, there is really nothing you can say that will help them understand you because your truth does not exist in their current reality. I don't know. I've had a lot of experiences like that where you're talking to somebody and it's usually not a heart to heart communication. They're in another altered state. Okay. They're blaming you, they're critical, whatever it is. And you can list out all the things that make sense and why you did something or why you said something. And no matter what, they're going to turn it and you're going to be the problem. Okay, there's something wrong with you. You are not going to win an argument. You are not going to win an argument. You can't because they can't hear you clearly. All right. And you might not even be making your best point if you're in an agitated state at that moment. So when you get in that off-centered vibration and you have a partner, okay, you are likely to influence your partner to shift off their center. People pick up vibes unconsciously, okay? So you shift off center, you're in a different state. They feel that, especially if you're close to them. You don't have to say anything. They just look at you. What's that look? They know. They know you don't have to say a word. Okay. But then your partner will almost always shift off center into the same off centered vibrational field that corresponds to the energetic field you're in. So let's say you get angry, all right, and you're going to cause an argument with your partner. Now, you may be with someone who gets angry back and you shift off center, you're angry, they get angry back, and it escalates. Or you get angry and you have the type of person who doesn't get angry back, but maybe retreats. They don't want an argument, so they retreat. But that makes you madder. Why are you abandoning me? Talk to me. And they retreat more. Okay. So it doesn't matter what the energetic states are. It's just that over time, they will repeat. Okay. You get off centered, your partner feels it, they go off center to whichever way they want to go. And that dance repeats. I call it an energetic dance. Okay. Similarly, your partner gets off center. You feel that. You'll shift too. And while you're in that energetic dance, nothing is going to resolve, no matter who starts off centered, because your partner's seeing it one way, you're seeing it another. Now, this doesn't have to be a partner. This could be coworkers, this could be friends, it could be anybody. Okay. But it's very difficult to communicate when you're each seeing it through this clouded filter of the energetic state that you're in. So, what are some of your psychological, emotional states that you might get into? Are you blaming or critical? Do you get angry a lot? Do you feel powerless? Do you feel fearful? Do you go into grief or do you get really frustrated? And I also have on this slide overly responsible because we usually think of all these sort of negative emotions as the things we don't want to get into. But even a positive emotion, if it's done to the extreme, is a state you don't want to be in. So if you get into an overly responsible place, you could make your partner go under responsible. You're picking up the laundry all the time and you keep doing it. So your partner doesn't have to, even though you get mad at them. When you get overly responsible, your partner can go under responsible. So you want to watch not only your negative emotions, but also anything that you might think is a good thing. If you overdo it, that's not really good either. I want to share this book, The Personal Aura, by an incredible woman, Dora Van Gelder Koons. She's since deceased a few years now, but she wrote about her clairvoyant perceptions of the human energy field she called the aura in her book, The Personal Aura, that was published in 1991. She defined the aura, the luminous cloud of color surrounding each of us is the personal emotional field. This book contains color illustrations of what Dora Koons perceived around individuals from various backgrounds and in different states of health. The aura pictures capture the essence of these individuals in terms of what they were feeling at that point in time. Dora Van Gelder Kunz was a clairvoyant, a writer, a co-developer with Dolores Krieger of Therapeutic Touch, which is an energy healing technique, and she was also the president of the Theosophical Society in America for 12 years. She was born on a sugar plantation on the island of Java, which is now Indonesia. She learned to meditate when she was about 5 or 6 years old. Years later, Dora moved to the United States and began to work with her friend, Dr. Otelia Bengston, in New York City. Dr. Bengston asked Dora to use her clairvoyant skills to help with some of her clients that were difficult to diagnose or resistant to treatment in her allergy and immunology private practice. Dora would tell Dr. Bengston what she thought the physical problems were and explained the role that the patient's emotions played in their disease process. Dora Kunz wrote, since we are continually feeling a succession of different emotions during daily life, these colors are sometimes fleeting, passing like tinted clouds through the aura, our personal field or atmosphere, or suffusing it with a sudden tide of strong color. Other emotions are much more enduring, and these become a more or less permanent feature of the aura. Emotional patterns result from the many factors and different life experiences, some good, some painful, some negative, some constructive. If we are not aware of these patterns, they can inhibit us in many ways and even lead to the beginnings of the disease process. So it's also good to be aware of your emotional state because as some of us work with this with our clients, we know that different emotions tend to sort of get stuck in different areas of the body. And the disease process can begin if those emotions aren't fully dealt with, processed, released. And the interesting thing about Dora Kunz is that as a clairvoyant, she could see around people different colors that represented to her different types of emotions that were common for that person to have. In this particular image here, you can even see different symbols, like the trees there, sort of in the middle. And Dora could see symbols in the aura as well, which is pretty amazing. And Dora would kind of have this line, this sort of greenish line that would kind of go through the center. And below would be the sort of emotions that you really felt strongly as a young person when you were growing up. And then the upper half is more of what you were dealing with now. But every person was different, and every the images that the energies that would go through at different points in time would create different colors, and she would have these different symbols too. But overall, people tend to have a basic sort of pattern, which is what I'm saying. You tend to habitually go into different emotions in your life. So it's really good to become aware what are the ways you normally react, and to be aware when you're in them. Maybe you don't want to be in them all the time. So what are your likely emotional reactions when you get pulled off center? I have a list here. There's plenty more. But do you feel abandoned, stressed, or betrayed? Do you feel ashamed or doubtful or worthless? Do you get jealous or lonely or feeling incompetent? Do you get hurt, or do you feel aggressive? Do you get embarrassed and fearful and anxious, or just get agitated? Do you feel rejected or sad or bored? So all of these things that I list here could be possible places that you tend to go. But like Dora Kuhn's picture, we have a few of them that are our usuals. To get in touch with where you tend to go, maybe it might be easy to think about. You're in your office. What are the emotional reactions you tend to feel when you're there? How about when you're home? What about in social situations, or in solitude, or when you're at church or at worship? What emotional reactions do you feel with your parents, or with your partner, your children, your friends, your coworkers, your boss? And you'll begin to see that it's almost as if you have a slightly different personality that we'll talk about in just a minute when you're in these different situations, or when you're with these different people. You can complete these sentences. I often feel, write it down. I sometimes feel, write it down. Because we just want to right now become aware of these types of states that we get into. Here's the good news. There is an observing self. So there's an event, you react, you shift into that energetic state. Your perceptions are influenced by that state, and the world seems like a different place. But the good news is that there still is a part of you we can call the observing self. It is a part of you that I like to think of as your true self, the soul, in other words, and it is aware of what's going on in a non-judgmental way. It doesn't blame you, doesn't get angry. It's merely collecting all these life experiences. We're growing, we're evolving. This is what being human is all about. It's very judgmental from that perspective, from that state of consciousness. And you can draw on that. You can realize from that perspective that you're in that state. And it takes honest and heartfelt practice. Like I said, it's not going to be so easy at the beginning to pull yourself out of it, because you're going to be like, oh, this is really it. This is really it. But let me give you some guidance. When you feel angry, you don't want to act from anger, okay? That adds more anger into the world. But the anger is there for an important reason. Whatever you got angry about, you probably don't want it to continue. It's there for a reason. It's helpful. So when you come back to your center, I'm not saying to be sweet and nice, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying take the information that you received from that reactive state. You're angry, you want something to change. Good. Come back to your center and think about it from that perspective. And you may get more creative ways of dealing with the situation to change the situation so that you're not adding more anger and grief to the world. You come back with a different type of energy, a different type of intention. You still might need to change it. There might be boundaries that need to be set. Okay. And absolutely go and do it. I'm not saying just be all lovey lovey. But I am saying be in your centered state to get higher guidance, higher wisdom that will then influence the way you think about it. So you can come up with more options, more different ideas of how you're going to respond, not react. So you're using your free will now more than ever because you're not really using your free will when you're in one of those states. You're just reacting. But you can use your free will more likely from your centered state where you choose consciously how you're going to respond. Now we're going to go into a little bit of a part 2 with identify, disidentify, identify. Walt Whitman said, I am large. I contain multitudes. Each of us contains multitudes. We're made up of many cells, and we identify with some cells and reject others, banishing them from our everyday awareness. This identification with some cells and the rejection of other cells can create disharmony and imbalance in how we live our lives. So I loved this when I learned this many years ago. It's called voice dialogue. It's a technique developed by Hal and Sidra Stone in the 1970s and 1980s to explore an individual's energetic states or energy patterns. Energy patterns may vary from what we talked about, like a vague feeling or barely discernible sensation, to what they called a fully developed self or sub-personality. The Stones found that each subpersonality's energy pattern animates the physical body in a distinct way. For example, each subpersonality tends to have distinct facial expressions, tones of voice, body movements, even physical symptoms like pain in a specific area. In addition, each subpersonality carries with it certain memories, like state-dependent memories. So, how do you identify yourself? Do you identify yourself as a spiritual person or a victim, a musician, a lawyer, Democrat or Republican, a sports fan, or as an American or some other nationality? There are many ways to identify yourself. Do you sometimes feel like an imposter or a good mother or a bad mother or good or bad father? A pleaser, somebody who wants to make everybody happy, a perfectionist, an inner critic. Do you want to think of yourself as a scientist or a boss or a person with a certain job? Okay, when you think of yourself as any kind of these kind of categories, there's also sort of an energetic field that contains that and the ways you're supposed to think about it, about reality when you're in that. So right now, with elections and everything, and we have Democrats, Republicans, independents in America, I'm talking about, of course, that if you really, really identify with one of those things, the other people are going to be so bad and you're not going to be able to hear them or think anything good can come from that, okay? Because you're in that field. That's all that exists. That's where all the good is. And anything else is the other. Recognize that. Okay. When you're the boss, you're acting a certain way. Or if you're a worker, you're acting one other way. Years ago, there was some great sociological experiments where they made students that all regular students, some of them were prison guards and some of them were prisoners. Well, if you were the prison guard, all of a sudden you were mean and you were treating the prisoners. And when you were the prisoners, you were, oh my gosh, you felt so powerless. And they had to stop the experiment early because people really got into it and were hurting each other. So when you get into these states of consciousness, these fields, if you will, you really believe this is how the world is, and you start acting and saying and thinking like that. I would really encourage everyone to start thinking about, how do you identify? You could put in this little circle here your 8 ways that you tend to identify the most. I'm a student, I'm an instructor, I'm a parent, I'm a daughter, whatever it is, you could put it down there. And you realize that when you're in those roles, you are limited in how you think. And when you come out of it, you can look at it better. Okay. You're an American. Maybe you think bad things about other people, or maybe you think bad things about America, is depending on how you enter that state. But you aren't clear completely when you're identifying so strongly with any of these feels. So the goal is to identify your emotional reactions and what I could call, and what the Stones would call, these sub personalities of yourself. But then after you identify them, you want to disidentify from them. That's not who you really are. That's a part of you. And it's okay that it's a part of you, but it is just a part of you. So the Stones would say, we must learn to honor all of ourselves. The selves we do not honor grow inside of us in unconscious ways, gaining power and authority. Have you ever heard of those creepy stories where somebody's like a minister and yet on the side they're being really sexually promiscuous, and then it comes out? Well, it's because if you think of yourself just as the minister, you can't do the whole sex thing probably, but you still have that. And so you do it kind of unconsciously and creepy in the shadows. So you want to recognize all the different parts of yourself and what that means. And you want to honor them all. As they say here in ancient Greece, it was understood that all the gods and goddesses should be worshiped. Although each person had a particular favorite, none of the remaining deities could be ignored. The god or goddess whom you ignored could be the one who turned against you to destroy you. So what we're talking about in this presentation is growing our awareness of who we are. So you're not all that. You disidentify from all of that. You recognize they are only part of you. You are not your fearful personality, but you can feel fear. You're not your angry personality, but you can feel angry. You're not your critical personality. You can feel critical. You disidentify from that. Roberto Assagioli talked wonderfully about a theory that he developed, psychosynthesis. It's a psychological theory that has a spiritual component. And he felt that we all have a personal self that we're sort of talking about now, but that is but a mere reflection of a spiritual self, something I would call the soul, that is the real essence of the person. And Roberto Assagioli said, we are dominated by everything with which our self becomes identified, but we can dominate and control everything from which we disidentify ourselves. And his student and collaborator, Piero Furici, said, we disidentify by observing. So remember that observing self? We pull that in, we look at ourselves, and we can disidentify. So observe your bodily sensations, observe your emotions, observe your thoughts, and say, who's looking at that? Who is looking at your body sensations, emotions, and thoughts? So you can say, I have a body, but I am not my body. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. I have thoughts, and this one can get difficult, but I am not even my thoughts. Who am I? And you will have to come up with your own answer. You can say, I'm a loving field of consciousness, temporarily having an experience in this body on earth at this time. I'm capable of observing, directing, and using my physical body, my emotions, and my thoughts. You can say, I am at this stage of my development a soul, an individualized portion of all that is of God. Because all of me is made up of God, and because there's nothing else but God, I can ultimately say, I am God. You might not like that. I do, but come up with your own. And remember that as we answer this question, who am I? Our perception of reality is different in different states of consciousness. You will answer it differently depending on your state of consciousness. So, part of the evolution of consciousness is an ever increasing awareness of all that we are and all that is. And to end today, I would just wish you, may you grow in awareness of the wonder of who you truly are. Blessings.